I'm Felicity, and it's fantastic to have this opportunity to connect with you today over the topic of effective workplace relationships. My passion for flourishing workplace relationships really comes from two places. One is that by improving our relationships, we improve both our individual and our collective performance. This meets our organisational objectives and our own needs for satisfying work. The second, and although by no means in second place, is that it helps us with our stress levels, that we can live and breathe more easily, and both are critical. From early on in my career in the food industry, I always wondered why some relationships seemed to flow better than others. This was particularly true when I started my coach training at Sainsbury's. In 3 hours of working with a new client, I found I knew more about them than I knew about my team members who'd worked for me for 3 years. Sorry, team. Something quite not right there. Since then, I have continued to make workplace relationships my focus. I noticed patterns, I've done some research, read theory, worked with clients, and have been developing an approach to relationships, which I hope is helpful. In sharing some of this approach with you today, I invite you to take the bits that you like and to discard the rest. And I hope that each of you can gain one little tip that will help you strengthen your relationships at work. So before we get started, one of my patterns in forming new relationships, and we are creating a new relationship here, is getting comfort from understanding how we've come to be in the same place at the same time. This can be a little bit tricky with a webinar, but you've already helped me out with this by answering some questions at registration. So let's look at why you're here, and then we'll go into what we can cover. Okay, so what brought you here? Here's a word cloud of your responses as to what you would like from today. And broadly, you want some insight into how to improve your relationships, whether it be working with customers, suppliers, other departments and functions, or your peers. What came out really strongly is you want to know how to work better with those in higher positions, your boss, your manager, your directors, and your senior stakeholders. There were some specific situations in which you wanted help. This might be office-based versus home working, you're new into a role, leading a team, how to handle difficult people, strong personalities, and those may include those who are awkward to approach or perhaps a bit competitive in spirit. So the common theme that I've extracted is what to do when it's not going so well. So I'm going to try and keep it fairly general in the hope that a little of something I share works for each of you. So looking at the progress and plan for today, as a coach, I believe in giving my clients the space to develop their own awareness and ideas for action. And to support this, I'm going to cover a bit of background, first of all, about why relationships are worth bothering with, how to describe them, and 3 critical shifts. Then I'm going to go on to share the first 3 tips. Then we're going to get to do some coaching together. The next 3 tips will follow, some time for you to action plan and for summing up and questions, and also any points that you want for clarity over the course of the webinar. So a little hands up to see if you've got the worksheet in front of you and you're ready to go. That's fantastic. I can see the hands all coming in, so that's good to know that you're all out there. So if you haven't got the worksheet in front of you, don't panic. You just need whatever piece of paper you can grab and you can capture your answers to the questions on whatever you have in front of you. So first of all, we're going to move on to why bother with improving workplace relationships. And I've come to believe that there are 4 good reasons. The first one is in the top left-hand corner. So relationships are essential for doing the job. And I can't believe that there are any positions in which work can be done without any interpersonal interaction. So even if you feel that it's easier to work alone, you're still in some kind of relationship with those around you. So that's reason number 1. Moving down to the bottom left-hand corner, relationships really fill a fundamental need in all of us to belong, to feel part of something, to not be isolated or alone. We're born into families and the need for connection continues with us into the workplace. And when this need to belong is met, our stress levels are found to drop and our health improves. So with the huge amount of time we spend at work, it's not doing our mental health any good to try and only meet this need through our connections and relationships with friends and family outside of work. A neuroscientist, Cosolino, sums it up well. We are born into relationship, and our attachment to others is at the core of our health, brain performance, and well-being. This has a connection to the third reason, which is on the top right. Relationships are essential for our personal growth and learning. So I hold a strong belief that our development comes from what we learn about ourselves through our relationships with others. You and I may never meet, but in this moment, in this relationship right now, you will be getting an insight into your own preferences. If you find that I am talking too slowly, perhaps you have a preference for speed. If you'd like me to get on with the coaching part of this, you may have a preference for action first over thinking and theory first. So you're learning about yourself all the time. The final reason is that healthy relationships are critical for organizational growth. I'm not talking about financial growth here, not about the pounds. I'm talking about the organization learning and developing as a whole to become more informed, more capable, more adaptive, more flexible than it was yesterday, last month, or last year. The quality of each relationship contributes to the culture of the organization. So having covered the 4 key reasons why it's essential to bother with improving the relationships, I want to share with you a language that I use around relationships to describe how healthy they are. So what we're doing here, so if you have a think about this as a continuum, on the left-hand side, you can see descriptions of fractured and languishing. In the middle is functioning, and on the right-hand side, on the healthier side, are flourishing relationships. What we're doing here is turning our attention to the health of the relationship. This is not about what you are doing or not doing, or what the other person is doing or not doing. We're describing the health of the relationship. And to help bring this alive, I'm going to use images of rivers. And I use rivers as a metaphor for relationships because how the water flows, the color of it, the clarity of it, can signal the health of the relationship. As an example, what lives in the river and can flourish indicates what the relationship can nurture and support. A vibrant ecology of fish and wildlife would suggest that the relationship is both productive and well balanced. If you want to read more about this, you can check out the story of why my business is called Bend the River on my website. So let's kick off with this first image, and I want you to look at it really carefully because it's going to disappear as we move into the poll, but have a look at it. And if this river is a relationship, what do you think the health of it is? Is it fractured, languishing, functioning, or flourishing? So get your thinking heads on. This is a river with debris blocking the flow. It's got lots going on around it. It's got quite a lot of energy, not a lot of water actually running through it. And if left untended, it could become completely choked up. Okay, so I'm just letting a few answers come in now. And that's fantastic. We've had 75% say that it's fractured. So let's have a look at what makes this a fractured river. The debris in particular shows that there's difficulty. The qualities that come through this is very much an I place. I find it a struggle. I don't believe we can be of help to each other. I don't trust them. They don't trust me. I don't understand them. It's very much an I place with a lack of help, trust, and understanding. So relationships in which there are power differentials, perhaps between a leader and a team member, can often sit between functioning and fractured, mostly because of a lack of knowing how to change them, and often a misguided belief that the quality of the relationship is the responsibility of the manager to improve. This is a really important point here. It's not. You both have equal responsibility in a relationship. It may not feel like it, but you do, and either of you can choose to instigate changes that can improve the relationship. So moving on to the next 2 rivers, another chance for you to get involved. So which of these rivers, A or B, might represent a languishing relationship? So time for you to tap in your answers into the poll. River A or River B? Fantastic. River A, 82% of you agree with me that River A looks like a languishing relationship. And really, the dry and arid riverbed signals a lack of energy here. It's like it's waiting for rain to be filled up and given purpose again. There's no animosity, just a lack of connection. You might have thoughts like, I don't really think about you. It just doesn't matter to me. I might ask you for help, but maybe I won't bother. I haven't really thought about it. I don't really know what I think about the relationship, and I don't know what you think about it. Okay, let's move on to the River B example, which was functioning. This is quite a different type of river, and I've chosen one that's full of water, but it can feel quite still because it's in balance. The mirroring effect highlights the connection and represents the shift from an I place in the relationship to a we place. It's mutual and two-way, and I just love how it reflects from one to the other. So let me give you an example here. Relationships between peers can often get stuck between languishing and functioning because there's just simply insufficient energy for it to be any better, for it to be for it to be improved. It's not terrible. It broadly works. It's okay. And I would argue that that's okay if it's A, fulfilling the performance needs, B, fulfilling everybody's well-being needs of both the organization and both individuals. It's only when it's not doing that it needs some attention and needs to be improved along the spectrum from languishing towards functioning. So let's move on to our last river that I'm going to share with you, which is flourishing. Okay, so the relationship has a strength and power. You can see that from the river. It has a depth that can handle turbulence and calmness. It's flexible and responsive. If it rains heavily, it can handle it. This is a relationship that adapts and learns under pressure. And the focus really balances the we, the I, the situational context that it's in. And in this river, you can see that it has a real strength to actually carve out and change the landscape around it. So moving on to 3 critical shifts then, which come out of these relationship types. The first one is to move from fractured to functioning. Really important here to catch it sooner rather than later. If you've got to undertake some work together, it's important to resolve those differences. The second shift is to move from functioning to flourishing. And you may have some great relationships with those around you, but if your organization is facing complex and uncertain problems and your remit as a leader is to collaborate with others to create a new and unknown future, then giving focus to your relationships is essential for both performance and well-being. These are typically relationships which are under a huge amount of pressure from the situational context. They've got to be flexible and adaptable. You've got to know each other well. The third shift is languishing to functioning. As mentioned earlier, it's only when there is imbalance and the relationship's not meeting the performance and well-being needs of both the individual and the organization that it's in need of improvement. And if you want to find your reason for bothering, go back to those 4 reasons I shared earlier to help you identify why you might want to be improving it, why it might feel out of balance for you. And the final note before we move on to sharing some tips is relationships are like rivers. They're dynamic patterns of actions and responses. What we're doing here is reflecting on what's going on for you so that you can then take action and create the conditions for your relationships to change. So you can see where we're at in progress, and we're going to move on now onto the first 3 tips. And the first 3 tips are all connected. They're all about our energy, attention, and perspective in relationships. There's a key premise that sits behind these 3 tips. And it's a big one. You can't change anyone else. You can only change your beliefs and actions in order to create the conditions for someone else to potentially change how they are towards you. You can only focus on the quality of your interactions. So this is a big one. We often so want somebody else to change to make lives easier for us, but the change has to come from within us first. And these first 3 tips tackle that. I want to give you a little exercise to help bring this to life because it's a really important point. So I want you to hold up your hands in front of you with palms facing each other. Lightly press them together like you're in a prayer position. Now use your right hand to push against the left. What happens? Typically, your left hand will push back to keep your hands central in front of your body and to keep the righteous hand from dominating. And this is what happens when someone wants us to change. Typically, we resist, we push back, and then nothing moves. We just get more stuck. So a quick hands up if that principle makes sense to you. Fantastic. Great to see those hands coming up. We'll move on to tip 1 now. So tip 1, by looking at the rivers, we've been turning our attention towards the relationship. And this is tip number 1. Relationships are the dynamic between us. They're not about improving me or you, but about improving us together. So I often hear people say, I find it so hard to work with them. They are so difficult. And the first tip is to identify that the difficulty is in your dynamic. There is difficulty in the relationship. This might be a result that you have different preferences and beliefs and they're coming head to head. It may be that the situational pressures are creating difficulty. Neither of you are difficult people. So tip number 1 is always focus on the we, not the me or the them. Tip 2. So if tip 1 is about where you put your attention, tip 2 is about the focus, energy, and commitment behind your attention. It's about putting the focus into helping things go right rather than dealing with the things that are going wrong, or even worse, amplifying and making the things that are going wrong even bigger. So this can mean breaking the pattern down of how you respond and react in the relationship at the moment. A great example of this is stop talking about the other person and instead talk to them about what's going on to help things go right. Tip 3. So your attention is in the we space of the relationship. Your focus and energy is on helping things go right. And tip 3 is about finding and building the heartfelt and positive intention inside yourself towards the other person. It requires us to change ourselves first, to change our own beliefs first. This can be really tricky in relationships, particularly those which are moving towards fractured. And it's tricky because there's often a desire that we want to win, overcome, be superior to the other person, or to punish them. So the key thing about suspending judgment and finding a heartfelt and positive intention towards somebody in your relationship is that your body language starts to shift and align to the words that you speak. Your positive intention becomes so much more believable that you mean good and not harm. You're not pushing against the other person so hard. So as such, the other person in the relationship is likely to become more open to you. Watch out if you're only speaking from your head. It's something that you think is a bit logical to say. Of course you believe in them, but it's not genuinely in your heart because it's unlikely to reach your body. The words just don't carry meaning. And at worst, you come across as false, and you can erode the trust even further. So just to sum up quickly on these first 3, the tick cloud is made up of all of the responses to your questions about what makes an effective workplace relationship. And I agree that all of these are characteristics you would expect to find in good, healthy relationships. However, it's a bit of a chicken and egg situation. Which comes first, the trust or the healthy relationship? The healthy relationship or the trust? It's hard to know. So these first 3 tips are designed to help you take steps towards building trust and improving the health of the relationship. It's about focus on the we, energy and commitment into helping things go right, and shifting your belief in the other person and suspending your judgment of them. So we're now going to do some reflection coaching to prepare you for taking action in the relationship that you want to improve. It's going to be split into two sections. And the first section that we're going to do is going to put the first 3 tips into practice. It's completely individual to you and private. And I'm very aware that the speed might work for some of you, but it may be too fast for others. So if it is a bit fast, just take some time later today to work through the questions. To help guide you through this, we have a worksheet, and the numbers on the worksheet relate to each tip, so you know where to capture your responses. So, first of all, before we get started, I want you to switch off from listening mode to reflecting mode. I want you to settle into where you're sitting, to draw your attention back to you, to take in some nice big breaths and allow yourself to settle. So bring to mind, first of all, the relationship that you would like to improve. And I want you to first off imagine it's a river, to notice the flow of your relationship. Have a look at the surroundings. Look at the water. What's in the sky above you? Look at where it's going and look at where it's come from. And just take a moment to really visualize it. All those colors. Perhaps there's some wildlife. And as you hold that image in your mind, write down 3 words that describe the river and trust that they are descriptive of the relationship. So you're putting this into box 1, capturing 3 words that describe the quality of your river and your relationship as it is now. Not how you want it to be, but as it is now. Okay. So moving on, I want you to just have a look at the little arrow that's there, and I want you to think about what is the health of this relationship, and to mark it on the diagram. Just leave a little cross somewhere along that continuum between fractured, languishing, functioning, and flourishing. And if you have a sense of it moving in a particular direction, which way it's moving along that health spectrum, mark that on as well with an arrow. Okay, fantastic. Let's move on now to box number 2 and tip number 2. So putting the energy into helping things go right. So here, I want you to give some thought to what you hope will be different if this relationship improves. And there are 4 sub-questions for you to work through. So just take a moment to reflect and think about what you hope will be different. Okay, so moving into, there's a little score out of 10 there for you. So what is your commitment to put your energy into helping things go right? What is your commitment to putting your energy into helping things go right? Give yourself a score out of 10. At this moment, notice what your commitment and energy is. So moving on to box number 3 and tip 3. In this one, you might find this a little bit tricky. But I want you to think about, what do you need to suspend? What judgment do you have of the other person that needs to be suspended? A good clue to this is to notice that if you ever say, oh God, I just wish they didn't do that, you're probably holding some level of judgment about them. And in the box next to it, to really think about one small thing. It can be tiny, but if you have lost belief in somebody that you're working with, really think about what it is that you believe in about this person, to start to build up a platform of belief, to build up your positive intention towards this person. Okay. I said it was going to be quite fast. We need to move on. So we've now brought those first 3 tips to life. So I'm now going to share each of the last 3 tips. We're going to do a tip, and then we're also going to add to the worksheet. So tip 4 helps us with tip 3. And because suspending judgment and finding positive intention can often be a bit tricky, we need a bit of help with this. So this is where tip 4 comes in. Tip 4 is about getting curious and really seeking to understand the other person and finding our compassion for how their behavior is simply an output of them doing the very best that they can in that moment. And I've listed some example questions here for you. So I'll just let you have a look at those and read them through. But what you're doing here is you're inviting them to join you in a conversation. And all of these questions hugely benefit from the addition of, would you be willing to tell me what motivates you? Would you be willing to tell me what builds your trust and what breaks it? Would you be willing to have a conversation with me about how it could benefit both of us if our relationship was better? You're inviting them into conversation. So on your worksheet, in box 4, what 3 key questions could you ask the person that you're in a relationship with that would help you understand them better? I'll just give you a moment to give some thought to those 3 questions. Okay, moving on to tip 5. This tip's about finding your courageous voice, and I know it can be challenging if you truly want a relationship to change, to find that courage, but it is important to step into it and not away from it, to use your voice, to say what you need, and that takes skill and courage. So imagine this scenario. You're one of a team, you get on well with your peers, your boss announced that they're moving on and applications into her role are being invited. It's the promotion that you've always wanted, but you know that others in the team are also applying. Amazing, you get the job. Now you're the manager of all of your peers. What was a great relationship with them is now strained. It's affecting your performance, their performance, and you all feel a little bit off kilter. This is the time for that conversation to say, how is everybody's needs and emotions, etc., being affected? It does take some skill and it does take some courage. So in box 5, now's the time to think about, what are you leaving left unsaid? So in the relationship that you're giving focus, what are you leaving left unsaid that might need to be spoken? Okay. Moving on to tip 6. This is a quick tip, but the last story sort of shows that if there's a significant change to the context in which your relationship operates, it's time for a check-in. How does that situation change our relationship? What now needs to change to meet the needs of the new situation? A good example from outside of work might be a couple about to have their first child. That, I would say, is a significant change to the context of a relationship. So there isn't a box for this one, but perhaps make a note of the context of your relationship. If it's changed, it's time for a check-in. Don't just let things sort of flow along with their own momentum. So we're now on to some pretty rapid action planning. So we're coming to the end of our content, and it leaves you a little bit of time to reflect on your actions, which is the last bit on your worksheet. And I would really sort of urge you to act on the energy you feel right now, to do something sooner rather than later. So just quickly note down 3 things that come to your mind about that you can take, things that you can think about or do over the next week as an indication of your positive energy and commitment. They might be self-reflective, notice a pattern more, or they might be more active and orientated to bring your courageous voice into the relationship. Okay, so to sum up, healthy relationships really are core to our performance and our well-being. Remember those 4 boxes at the beginning. The relationships are a we space, not a me or a them place. I really want to encourage you to move away from I or they do this. Think about what we do. It's the dynamic between. Improving relationships requires attention, intention, and courage. And finally, the potential for change sits within each of us. Never assume it's the responsibility of somebody else. You can all take action to improve the quality of your relationships. Just do a little bit of reflection first, that can help. So you've heard 6 tips which can help you unlock the potential of your relationship. So here they are all together on one slide. And another way of working with these tips is to give yourself a mark out of 10 for each one. How well do you do this in your relationship? Notice where your skill and personal development may lie. Some of you may be great at speaking out. Some of you may be fantastic at asking questions or bringing your attention and effort. So I believe that the practice of building workplace relationships is the missing area of development, falling somewhere between individual leadership and team development. And paying attention with good intention to our relationships is a leadership practice that has received very little attention to date. And I'm sharing here one of my favorite quotes, that the most powerful processes of change occur at the micro level, where relationships, interactions, small experiments, and simple rules shape the emerging patterns. Each relationship we have at work combines to create the culture of our teams and our organizations. So if we start by shifting our attention and intentions within each of them, we start to change our cultures. And cultures which help us perform, but also support our mental health and well-being. So if you want to, if you've got any further questions or you want to get in touch with me, please feel free to drop me a line on either my email or via LinkedIn. Please just mention that please just mention that you've been on the webinar, so I've got a little bit of context, and that will be really helpful. Thank you very much.